Hi guys, it's Chris. Oftentimes when we're using SAS, in my case SAS Enterprise Guide, the first thing we need to do is read in data, and often that data comes to us as text files. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to read text files with SAS Enterprise Guide, and then take it a step further to help save you work down the road. Let's take a look. I have here my Enterprise Guide session up with an open project, and I also have a list of text files open in Windows Explorer. Just to get started, I'm going to go ahead and drag one of those text files over into my project. And if I double click on it to open it, you'll see Enterprise Guide just shows me a preview of what's in that text file. And you can see it's a pretty simple text file. It just has a few fields and it's comma delimited. To get started with turning this into a SAS data set so I can do stuff with it in SAS, I can right click on the file within my project and select import data. I can also select import data from the file menu and pick any text file from my system that I want. But I like to preview the data a little bit first. This leads you step by step through the process of importing text file into data or an Excel file. I can click through next in this wizard and review all the settings, but for now I'm just going to go ahead and click finish and see what it does. Right now it's reading in the data for me and bring it into a SAS data set. And just to show you the result, it created a SAS data set for me that looks pretty simple. It's just got two fields. It's got my text, which is my titles, and it has a date. And one of the important things you'll notice is this date is a real date. Even though it was text in my text file, SAS interpreted it as a real date value so that I can do math and sorting on it later. That's an important aspect. Now, if that's all I needed, then I'm done. If all I needed to do was bring this one file in this one time and then get to work with it, I don't need to do anything else and I can go on with my day. But oftentimes, reading in a text file is just the start of a journey. And to help save work down the road, I like to do a little bit of work up front to generalize this step so that I can reuse it over and over again later on. So let's go through those steps. Since I've used the import data task as a start, I can go ahead and click modify task to bring up that task setting again. And now I'm going to go through and examine the settings a little more thoroughly. If I click next here, you'll see, first of all, a warning that this text file is kind of long and Enterprise Guide read through only 4,000 or so of the records to help kind of determine the types and lengths of the variables that it's going to read in for me. So that's a caution, just so you know that if there are data records later on in the file that deviate from those earlier cues, well, the Enterprise Guide might get it wrong. Also, it correctly detected the delimiter. It's a comma delimited file, and it correctly detected that the file contains field names on the first record, meaning title and date are correctly identified as the column headings. Next, you'll see I have just two fields, and it's Enterprise Guide is showing me the names and types of these fields and how it determined they should be read. So I have default length, which is basically based on the length detected when Enterprise Guide read through those 4,000 or so records and figured out what the longest one of those was. It's 167. It detected that the second field, the date, matched a pattern of a date field, and so it determined it should be read in as a date and formatted as a date. If I like these settings, I can just leave them the way they are, or if I want to continue to use the import wizard here, I can go ahead and I can actually change values in here. I can say that I want that length to be not 167, but I need it to be maybe 200 because I know I have some longer titles. I can go ahead and make those changes right in here, and when I rerun the step, it will reflect that. But actually, I'm not going to make those changes here because I'm going to end up making those changes out in code. Because behind the scenes, this import data task is actually generating some SAS code for me, and I want to take advantage of that. So I'm going to go ahead and click cancel here, and I'm going to go concentrate on the code. Let's just take a moment and examine what Enterprise Guide generated for me. This is a pretty standard data step. It's setting up the variables that I'm going to read in with their length and their formats and in formats. And then the INFILE statement is actually the thing that does the work, along with the input statement. Enterprise Guide, the import data wizard, is very explicit about how it generates the code. So if you were writing this code, if you've written data step code before to read in data, you might not have used all of these statements because maybe you don't think that you need them for your purpose, and you'd be right. But Enterprise Guide is not taking any chances and explicitly putting out all these different statements. Another thing you'll notice is the INFILE, the location of the file, is this really long, squirrely looking file path that is actually just a temp space. The import data task, to do its work, is actually reading in the text file and then making a quality pass on it. A lot of times we get data that's just a little bit messed up, let's face it. It's not the cleanest data, not in the most standard format. And Enterprise Guide, as part of its import data wizard, tries to clean that up for you, and then it takes that cleanup version and it writes it to a temporary space. And then the SAS code is generated to read from that temporary space and read it in. That's great for that one pass, just get it done approach. But if you need to generalize this for a later step, you're going to need to tell the Enterprise Guide import data wizard to skip that step. So this is how we do that. In the modify task, back to the import data task, under performance, it's a little bit hidden, but you click on performance and you tell the wizard to bypass the data cleansing process. That sounds like something you wouldn't want to do, but believe me, for this case, in order to get something that we can generalize for use later on, we definitely need to do that. So I'm going to click OK there. And then one more spot at the end, the last page, we have some other advanced options. There's only one advanced option I want you to look at here, and it's the generalize import step to run outside SAS Enterprise Guide. These two options, the performance to bypass the cleansing and generalize the import step, this is for those cases where you're going to take this code that you developed in Enterprise Guide and you're going to run it somewhere else, say in a batch process later on, or you're going to give it to somebody else to run in another environment. In order to make this code more portable and less specific to the settings that you picked in your task, these are important steps. So I'm going to go ahead and click Finish on that. You see the result is exactly the same for my data set, but the code looks a little bit different. You can see now I've got a much more reasonable INFILE. It's actually the same exact path that I'm looking at over here in my window on the left. So that's it. That's my great starting point for my code. And from here on, I'm going to deviate from the wizard and I'm going to go into my own code window. A couple of ways to create a code window. At this point, I can just copy this and select File, New, and do a new program. Or I can just act like I'm going to type in here. I'm just going to click Spacebar. And Enterprise Guide prompts me and says, hey, this is read-only, but you want to create a code node that you can modify. And so I selected to do that. And now I have a new code node that is separate from my import wizard. Let's get to work on optimizing this program. So the first thing you might notice is that if we look back over on the left, I don't have just one CSV file. I've got 5. Now, I don't want a separate input step for every one of these programs or every one of these files. Instead, I'm going to import all of these at once because I know they are all formatted the same. They're all coming from the same source. They all represent maybe sort of different aspects of the data, but they are format-wise identical. So I'm going to use a wildcard selector in my INFILE statement in order to capture all of those files. So instead of Netflix viewing history _, whatever, I'm just going ahead and select and put an asterisk in there. Your standard file selector or wildcard. That's one step. Remember I said that the length, the title was detected maybe too short because it could only read the first 4,000 records. I know I have more than that here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little buffer in here and make that 200. So I know I'm going to have enough room for all my titles. I don't need a special format for the title. It's just a character format, a character value. So I'm going to delete that line. And for the output format on the date, I'm going to make that date 9. That's my preference. Again, in format, I don't need a special in format for this, so I'm going to delete that. I will leave this in format though, because it correctly detected that the date value I'm reading is in the MMDDYY format. So I'll leave that. Good pick. Import wizard. On the input statement, I'm going to delete that directive, but I'll leave the one here for input date where it says basically the question mark symbol says read this date if you can in this format, and if it works, great. If it's not, it's just a missing value, but it's not going to generate any warnings or errors for me as a result. That's just a little programmer input trick that the import data task does for you. And the last thing I want to do here is I'm just going to remove this suffix. So it's just Netflix viewing because I'm reading all these at once. They're not just specific to my phone. And I'll delete this comment too. Okay, so let's run that. That ran really quick and it read all those files. So you can see all told I have, by looking at the scroll thumb here, I've got 7,200 or so records in my Netflix viewing history. Ooh, that's a lot of videos that my family watches. There's a couple more things I want to do though. Because I want to capture the information about which file sourced which record, that's another modification I can make to the INFILE statement here and to the data step. So the first thing I need to do is I need to define a couple more variables inside the data step to capture that information. So I'm going to make some room here and add, let's do file name. And this needs to be big enough to hold the full path of the file names that I'm reading in. So I'm going to make that just be generous. I'm not going to save this field ultimately, but I need space for it in the data step to read it in. And then I'm going to have another one called profile. That's going to be the name of the streaming profile that I'm being used, indicated by the suffix on the file. And that one's going to be shorter. I know that's probably no more than, let's say 25. And now that I have that set, I can go ahead and add an option on the INFILE statement to capture that value. There's a cool option on the INFILE called file name, which sets a temporary variable inside the data step that corresponds to the source file that you're reading in. So when you're doing something like I'm doing and reading in multiple files at once, this variable will be set to the current file that you're reading in. So file name equal to file name. That basically says that variable file name that I defined up here is going to capture that value. By default, the data step will not carry that variable in your output. So I'm going to also capture that in a separate line. And I'm going to parse out I don't need the full path of the file with everything on my C drive and all the folders that it's in. I really just want the root file name, the core file name. So I'm going to separate that out in my variable called profile. I'm going to use a scan function for that. Basically, I'm going to use scan to read in basically the last token within that file path. So let's do scan, and file name is the source, and the count is, I want to read backwards basically to get from the point of the last slash or delimiter within that folder path. So, like you have a file that's C:\users/ YouTube / Netflix / and then your file name. I just want the part that happens after that last slash. So because I'm scanning backwards from the end, I'm going to use a -1. So basically I'm going one space back, and the token I want is that /. We'll share more about the scan function, how you can use that in the description for this video. So, did I do everything right? Well, let's find out. I'm going to go ahead and run this. Okay. Ran really quick. Let's bring that data over. And you can see now I've got my extra variable, the profile, captured. That shows me the source for the files. If I scroll down a bit, you can see I've got different ones. Oh, it looks like I didn't allocate quite enough space for that profile name. Easy to fix. I'm just going to go ahead and bump it up to, let's say, 40. And I'll rerun that, and now that's better. Yeah, now I got it all. And now I have a generalized input step that I can use without having to change it. If I drop more files in here, or I can give this to somebody else who maybe has their own set of these kinds of files that they want to use, named a little bit different than mine, and they can just use this program as is. I hope you liked this video. There are related links in the description. Please leave me some comments. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you want more tips like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Thanks. See you next time. Should I subscribe to this channel? Yes, you should. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Totally worth it. You'll be thrilled every Monday.